Then, on an exceptionally warm February day, a 7-year-old boy went missing during a hockey tournament, and the police were called. Every available adult in the vicinity helped with the search, and in less than an hour, William Sr. found the child at the edge of the forest. Crudely buried under a pile of snow, he cleared the snow away and touched the boy's icy cold face. Then he noticed the bloodstains on his coat and realized foul play was involved. Now it's time for Puppets, Pupils, and Producers, a story of mind over matter. Since it meant another legal battle with Rich, Cassie didn't dare complain that working night shifts was harder than expected. Sam's support and coffee helped, but they couldn't soothe the circadian rhythm she ignored. So every few months, she'd convince herself she was preventing the cold or flu her exhaustion would invite, and she'd call in sick. Recharging her batteries usually involved preparing a meal only she liked to eat, followed by a bubble bath and sleeping for as long as possible. The only drawback to taking a preventer sickness day off was the guilt she'd have to endure, because too many times really bad things happened at work on the nights she was supposed to be there but wasn't. In fact, the pattern had become noticeable enough that her reputation of being a witch got mixed in, and she'd been accused of placing a curse on those involved, or of having psychic abilities that foresaw the incident, which was not true, except for a couple of times. But the visions were cryptic, and she rarely understood their meaning until after the fact. Otherwise, it was random stuff like thinking of someone right before they called, or just before they knocked on the door. And it didn't happen consistently, which was why she wasn't sure if she was discovering her intuitive gifts or losing her mind. Ever since Cassie started sleeping in the noisy daytime, she'd gotten into the habit of wearing earplugs. So she didn't hear the stairs creaking, the footsteps, or the knocking on the walls. But Sam did. Experiencing it himself led to him changing his non-believer status, and eventually to his confession of leaving the radio on in the kitchen so it would drown out the things that went bump in the night. Whether her children actually heard the noises, she didn't know. They were, however, aware of the house's reputation because their father told them that the house their crazy mother bought was haunted by the man who'd killed himself inside it. At first, Cassie thought it was simply another one of Rich's malicious lies. But it was true, and they were shocked to learn that disclosing sordid details to prospective buyers was not required by law. Regardless, their real estate agent swore he did not know about the incident prior and would look into the matter. A day later, he arrived at their door with a large fruit basket and confirmed that 30 years prior, a man had ended his life in the house. Despite not hearing the noises herself, Cassie had plenty of experiences where she'd either smell cigarette smoke or brute cologne, which she was very familiar with because as a kid it was her special Father's Day gift, up until he finally told her he hated the smell of it. If she hadn't found it funny that the ghost in her house wore brute cologne, it might have scared her more. But it didn't scare her as much as it intrigued her. So on the nights when no one else was home, she'd find Sam's EMF meter and she'd go ghost hunting. Shortly after moving into the house, they met Lynn and Len, who lived around the corner. Parents of 4 children, they often spent a Saturday night with Sam and Cassie, having an adult meal and a very competitive game of crokinole, while the kids ate popcorn and watched movies. Like Cassie, Lynn was fascinated with the paranormal. Len, on the other hand, thought the noises could be easily explained by an expectation bias. However, his opinion came with the caveat that he was open-minded, and if any house had a reason to be haunted, it would be theirs. Born and raised in the area, Len knew the family that used to live there and confirmed the tragedy, but clarified it wasn't Billy who'd ended his life in the house. It was his father, and he was sure the man hung himself in the basement. Len also went to school with Billy, who he referred to as a loose cannon, and added he was surprised that instead of going to jail, he became a correctional officer at the same facility where Sam and Cassie worked. Sam explained that other than sharing a building and parking lot, the bad side and the mad side were two different entities, so they hadn't met Billy, and under normal circumstances probably wouldn't. Admittedly, other than knowing the who and the how, Len didn't know the why, but he'd heard plenty of local lore that decided the father ended his life because his arrest for the murder of a 7-year-old boy was imminent. He'd also heard that he was gay, which unfortunately occurred in an era where homosexuality and predatory sexual behavior were conflated. But the rumors only scratched the surface because the real story began decades earlier, when along with being linked to criminality, homosexuality was considered a mental illness. So, like most gay men at the time, he hid his true sexuality and married a woman, which in this case was 18-year-old Barbara, who wasn't socially withdrawn and unemotional by choice, but because she was in the prodromal phase of schizophrenia. Barbara grew up in what was called a troubled household. While no one could say exactly what the problem was, it was known that both of Barbara's parents were referred to as morons, which wasn't an insult, but a term actually used by mental health professionals to describe someone with a mild intellectual disability. Despite leaving school very early, Barbara grew up on a farm, so she'd seen how babies were conceived and delivered. She also understood that unless they were making a baby, her closeted husband wouldn't be bothering her for sex, which for reasons she could not or would not articulate, suited Barbara just fine. After a normal pregnancy, their first son would die during his birth when his umbilical cord got wrapped around his neck. However, their grieving wouldn't end there, because their second child would also die, but from pneumonia just before her second birthday. Their last attempt produced another son, whose difficult breech delivery finally drove Barbara over the edge and into a world where her paranoid delusions would convince her that Billy was more fragile than most. To keep him alive, Barbara isolated her son and intentionally confined him to his playpen for far too long. Believing it was for his own good, she let him cry until his primitive brain decided no one was coming. Self-soothing by rocking his body and sucking 3 of his fingers at a time came soon after, and a delay in the development of his speech, motor skills, and emotional regulation followed. As a result, Billy struggled in school, and his lack of socialization skills made him a target for bullies. His teachers tried to help him by having him repeat grade 1 and later grade 2, but it only widened the gap between Billy and his classmates. By grade 3, he towered over most of the children and was consistently described as emotionally disturbed and defiant. Barbara struggled as well, but not because of her son's difficulties or her husband's proclivities, but because of her unrelenting delusions that reinforced her horrifying hallucinations involving a bloody crime scene in her son's bedroom. Sometimes she'd question her son, and she'd swear if he told her the truth, she'd protect him. Other times, she'd accuse him of terrible things, and she'd threaten to put him up for adoption. But he couldn't see the blood she described, and because no one explained his mother's illness, the only intervention he knew involved running away, which would instigate her call to the police. When he ran away, he didn't go far. In fact, he had a special spot at the edge of the forest where no one could see him, but he'd be able to watch the police arrive, followed by his father and an ambulance, which meant it was safe for him to go home. Unfortunately, from that same spot, he could also see men walking into that forest, where he'd eventually happen upon his own father and the principal from his school doing what homosexual men do. Then, on an exceptionally warm February day, a 7-year-old boy went missing during a hockey tournament, and the police were called. Every available adult in the vicinity helped with the search, and in less than an hour, William Sr. found the child at the edge of the forest. Crudely buried under a pile of snow, he cleared the snow away and touched the boy's icy cold face. Then he noticed the bloodstains on his coat and realized foul play was involved. He started waving his arms for assistance, and once he knew an officer had seen his signal, he reached for his handkerchief and began to cry. As he stepped away from the body, he felt something unusual under his boot and discovered one of his son's many pocket knives covered in blood. William Sr. was questioned by the police, not just because he'd found the body, but also because an eyewitness told the police they'd seen him leaving the forest earlier that afternoon. From that day on, if anyone bothered to speak to him at all, it was only to insult or accuse him. Even his lover thought he acted oddly when the topic came up, and their clandestine relationship ended. In the months following, the condemnation grew until the only person who didn't suspect him was the murderer. Hola, hola, peoples! If you're enjoying my fictional self-healing series, I'd love your feedback. I'd also love it if you'd feed the algorithm by following me and liking the post. And if you're stuck in the mindset and frequency of a puppet, and you'd like an energy session with me, please reach out and we'll make it happen.